Well, thank you for having me, Rick. My name is Grant Beckwith. I'm the head of school at American Heritage School in American Fork, Utah. We are a Latter-day Saint oriented private K-12 school. We have about 1,000 students on campus in kindergarten through 12th grade, and we have about 5,000 students that participate online in all 50 states and about 60 countries. My personal background, I've been the head of school here for 16 years. I'm a husband, a father. We have 4 children. The 3 youngest, ages 11 to 17, are still here at the school. And the oldest, age 19, graduated from American Heritage and is currently on a mission in Colombia, South America.
Great.
Professionally, my background was in law and business. I practiced mergers and acquisitions, corporate law, and public finance with a large international firm called Nixon Peabody in Washington, D.C. That's actually what I was doing when the Board of Trustees reached out to me in 2005 and asked if I would consider changing my career and bringing my young family and coming to be an educator, which we obviously did, and I've loved it. The school, in terms of its history, this is our 50th anniversary. The school was founded in 1970. It's a carryover of the old BY High and BY Academy, which is the Brigham Young training school that existed for about 100 years on University Avenue in Provo, Utah. It was an extension of Brigham Young University, and it was the School of Education Training School. And so they had teachers that were learning to be teachers there, but they also had about 150 students, elementary, middle, and high school students. And when the church decided to close that, Ernest Wilkinson was the president at BYU at the time. When the church decided to close the BY High and Training School, those parents and students and many of the teachers wanted to keep this faith-oriented culture and school going. And so they were given permission by the church to purchase a little chapel, LDS chapel in Pleasant Grove, Utah, that was going to be demolished, and continue it under an independent name. So that's when American Heritage School started, 1970. It became independent of the church and has always been independent of the government. So purely private. We're not a charter school, and celebrating our 50th year. It's been a really fun 50 years.
Oh, that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about what you offer and some of your successes.
Okay. So American Heritage School is one of the larger private schools, K-12 schools, not only in Utah, but in the Northwest Association of Independent Schools. I'm on the board of governors of that association, and especially if you count our online students, we really are doing some innovative and extraordinary things to make the school accessible to families. First and foremost of which is keeping our tuition at a price point that middle to lower income families can afford it. We charge about 1/4 to 1/5 of what most similarly situated and facilitated private schools charge. Most private schools are in the range of $15,000 to $30,000 a year. That offer the kind of offerings. We're a full service private school, everything from athletics to after school music, orchestra, choir, basketball, soccer, art, you name it, summer camps. It's really all the offerings that you might imagine.
Football?
Football, 7-on-7 is not the traditional tackle, but 7-on-7 football was actually proposed this year. We'll probably start that next year. We'll see how that goes. But volleyball, tennis, track and field. We have a beautiful stadium. We have an arena for basketball and volleyball. 3 buildings on campus. So our tuition compared to most is low, averaging somewhere between $5,000 and $9,000, depending upon the grade level. In part because of our approach to school finance, which is that we have not relied upon debt. We have no debt. We don't accept federal, state, or local government funding, not a penny. We have a real sacrifice culture here in terms of parents who understand the faith-oriented mission of the school, and so they're very generous. All buildings are constructed with donated funds only. We don't do any bonding, no loans, none of that. The only thing we charge tuition for is to pay the day-to-day operating expenses, the light bills, the personnel costs. That's it. And we try to operate in a way that we include families as much as possible, such that families are doing everything that families can do, and the school is doing just what the school needs to do. We really view ourselves as an extension of the home. So we don't provide a full service lunch program, for example, because we feel like that feeding the family is not only important for the family to do, but it's actually quite expensive when schools start to try to become the family, right?
Yeah.
And provide all of these social services that really belong in the province of the family. Now, I'm not trying to say that public social services aren't necessary. We get that there are many households that have one or no parents in the household. And so I'm not trying to say that what the public system does here is wrong. It's just that we have some more flexibility as a private school to do some things here because we have a whole community of parents that agree about what they want the school to focus on and what they don't want the school to focus on, right? So. You wanted me to talk about academics a little bit?
Yes,
That's a broad overview of the school.
Yeah, just, like reading, math, STEM.
Sure.
How do you compare?
So in terms of a comparison, we do take national norm referenced exams to make sure that parents can compare outcomes here, academic outcomes. Elementary school standardized test scores are typically 1 to 3 years ahead of norm reference peers. Middle and high school, the gap actually starts to widen there. By the time we get to high school, ACT scores, the average ACT score in Utah for public schools is around a 20 to a 21. Our average is about a 26, with many of our students in the upper third scoring well above 30. They receive admissions to outstanding universities around the country and the world. We have had about our 10-year average admissions to BYU Provo, which is a very selective private university, and where a lot of our families have their sights set because we're a Latter-day Saint-oriented private K-12 school. We have about a 70% admission rate to BYU Provo among those students who apply, which is extraordinary.
Right.
BYU Provo has some matriculation statistics that are about as competitive as some of the top Ivy League schools because of the number of applicants. So our admission statistics are very good. The academics are in reading, for example, if you want to break it down and look at reading and math and science and things like that. In reading, we use a combined phonetic and whole reading approach starting in elementary school that is a multi-sensory approach to reading. It's called Spalding, but we use a few other methods, which basically teaches children to write in a way that they see it, they say it, they write it, and they think about it all at the same time, using all their senses to learn to read. Orthography is very important here. That is to say, handwriting.
Bravo.
Handwriting is a lost art, and it is incredibly,
Yes.
it's powerful cognitively speaking.
Yes.
It connects the macro and micro motor skills with the brain, left and right brain in some ways that really causes cognition to fire. And so we focus on orthography clear through upper elementary. So cursive is strong here. Grammar.
I must introduce my sixth grade teacher was the principal of the school. Now, this was many years ago, and we had to write the Lord's Prayer in cursive. And if we went below the line or above the line, we had to start all over again. And I have beautiful handwriting, and it's the reason that I am so brilliant.
You actually might be surprised. You're saying that facetiously, but there's a lot of data and analysis and literature behind the correlation between intense practice with handwriting and other academic outcomes.
I knew it.
Because of what it does for the brain.
That's great.
So, that reading in the elementary school program and orthography turns into etymology and composition in the upper elementary and middle school programs. And by the time we get to high school, it has become a very robust and deep-seated communications program that has written thesis, oral defense of theses, master projects, summative capstone projects on social controversial issues. Our 7th grade students do what's called a master project, where they pick a hero and they study that hero in depth. They do a presentation and a big written portfolio on it. By the time they get to 12th grade, they actually defend a 20-page thesis that they write on a social controversial topic of their choice. They defend that thesis before a professional or academic adjudication panel, so that by the time they get to college, so many college professors in America are saying that students are not coming to college even reading anymore, let alone writing. And here our students are coming to college, and they've already done what very few college students even do in their undergraduate years anymore, with this thesis, adjudication, and defense, and writing. So we're really proud of our language arts instruction, that reading and writing and communication program. In math and science, we are doing some pretty exciting things. We use a very traditional math fact approach to math, which means that by the 4th grade, our students have really mastered addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. There are many math programs that sort of are introducing this experimental math concept, which is that students should sort of figure out how math concepts work, and they should play with manipulatives until they figure out addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And we're sticking with Saxon Math K-12, which says, no, just use memorization to learn the basic foundational concepts of math, and then move into consumer math in upper elementary, which is money math, right?
Right.
This is financial literacy. This is understanding transactions, and using word problems and using business problems to do that in upper elementary. Then when you get into middle school and high school and theoretical math, such as algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, you're actually doing it from an applied science standpoint, because you've learned to apply math in context of your world, right? And so our STEM program, which is really, really exciting, we're building, in fact, an entire $10 million, this is a 4th building on our campus that's devoted to STEM, and it's going to have a space simulator component to it. And there's many schools that have space simulators, because space is such a beautiful learning scenario. You can change gravity, you can change chemistry, you can change physics in so many, well, you don't really change physics, but you can manipulate, right? Variables. And so many schools have space labs, but next to our space lab, we have built in our STEM facility a creativity lab, a maker space, a design space, so that the students can actually build the tools. And that could be high-tech or low-tech tools. It could be anything from textiles, woodworking, metalworking, to high-tech like CNC machines, 3D printers, green screens, 3D design, CAD drafting, high-tech to low-tech tools to create the solutions for their space simulation that they're going through. And so it turns STEM into a very fun but still complicated game that they've got their hands on. They're doing laboratory work with it. They're doing garage work with it, right? So it's a lot of fun, and our test scores in science and math are also typically 1 to 3 years ahead of norm referenced peers on the state and national level.
Well, tell me about your demographics, minorities, etc.
So American Heritage School has a very intentional approach to a diverse population. We have international students, typically somewhere from 30 to 50 at all grade levels in high school. About 20% of each class are from other countries. Asia, Africa, South America, Europe. And we also have, just because we attract a certain broad swath of families along the Wasatch Front here in Utah, we also have a higher than average percentage of persons of color and families of color that come to the school, even more than the public schools. We're about, on any given year, we're averaging about 10% persons of color, students of color. We have faculty members of color. We're very intentional about that too. We just feel like that strengthens our whole fabric of free and open inquiry, of exposure to diverse peoples, of global cultures and religion. And we're not all Latter-day Saints in terms of the family demographics here. There are families that come from other faiths. We have families from India here and the Hindi faith. We have families from other Christian faiths, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist. And we have relationships with schools from other faiths and other political views too. We have actually featured in the New York Times for a program that we participate in that's called Building Bridges, which is a student program where students from predominantly conservative parts of the country and the world get together online with students from predominantly liberal parts of the country and the world, and they just listen to each other.
Oh, wow, that's great.
It is wonderful. And it uses a lot of the toxic polar divisiveness, right? It doesn't mean that they're necessarily abandoning their faith or their principles or their values. It just means that they're listening to the other side in a civil way. So these are some of the things that we're working on here.